All petrol engines in the BMW 1 Series were completely new for 2004. The N Series inline 4s have an aluminum cylinder block and a high operating temperature. They all love and demand high-quality motor oil. By the way, all single engines readily reject oil, i.e. they pass it reliably through all kinds of gaskets and seals. In addition, if you allow the piston rings to become coked and problems with crankcase ventilation are overlooked, these engines begin to waste oil. By the way, the engine code is present on the VIN plate. This is the easiest way to identify the engine if you are not very familiar with the BMW brand. 116i 1.6 liters 115 horsepower and 45 B16. 118i 2.0 liters 129 horsepower and 46 B20. 120i 2.0 liters 150 horsepower and 46 B20. 120i 2.0 liters 170 horsepower and 46 NB20. So the basic gasoline 4s at the time of the debut of this model in 2004 were the N45 and N46 engines, with a displacement of 1.6 and 2.0 liters, respectively. Both have two Vanos phase regulators. The younger one does not have a valvetronic throttleless intake. The older one also has balancer shafts. These engines are strong and durable, but their complex systems, very sensitive to oil quality, throw up unpleasant surprises. There are times when, against the background of a large oil burn, one of the intake valves burns out. By the way, oil easily pours into the cylinders through hardened valve stem seals, and their timing chains barely last 150,000 kilometers, but they change quite easily, without removing the front engine cover. By the way, these engines do not have such a cover. 116i 1.6 liters 122 horsepower and 43 B16. 116i 2.0 liters 122 horsepower and 43 B20. 118i 2.0 liters 143 horsepower and 43 B20. 120i 2.0 liters 170 horsepower and 43 B20. In 2007, along with restyling, a new 4-cylinder engine appeared in the model range, N43. He introduced direct injection to BMW fans. This engine complemented the model range and was offered, as a rule, in markets where the quality of gasoline was not in doubt. Essentially, this is the same N45 and N46, but with a new cylinder head, into which 4 direct injection nozzles are vertically inserted. The valvetronic system did not fit into this engine. Today this engine does not cause much trouble. In fact, the problems are still the same. Terrible and expensive troubles with injectors and injection pumps are a thing of the past. 125i 3.0 liters 218 horsepower and 52 B30A. 128i 3.0 liters 231 horsepower and 52 B30A. 130i 3.0 liters 258 horsepower and 52 B30A. 130i 3.0 liters 265 horsepower and 52 B30A. The inline 6s under the hood of the 1 Series are represented by the N52 engine with a real displacement of 3 liters. He produced the most horses on a 5-door pre-styling hatchback. Rare versions with indexes 125i and 128i are Coupe, E82, and convertible, E88. N52 is the N46 engine enlarged to 6 cylinders. Of course, without balancer shafts. In principle, it still has the same problems. High temperature control quickly runs out of oil. Oil leaks on all rubber bands, damaged valve stem seals, a stretched timing chain, problems with the crankcase ventilation valve and electric pump, problems with the valvetronic and DISA systems. All this will not happen at once, but once every 300,000 kilometers it will require an investment of money. 135i 3.0 liters 302 horsepower N54. 135i 3.0 liters 306 horsepower and 55 B30A. 135 is 3.0 liters 320 horsepower and 55. 1M Coupe 3.0 liters 335 horsepower and 54. Based on the N52 engine, 2 hotter engines were created, the twin-turbo N54 and the turbocharged N55. It has 1 twin-scroll turbocharger. Both also have direct fuel injection. This is not to say that these are bad engines. Usually their story ends sadly when the owner cannot afford to properly service and diagnose it. Expensive troubles with high-pressure fuel pumps and injectors are a thing of the past. Reliable versions of these components were offered, and the N54's turbines were eventually fixed. In general, these engines are capable of traveling 300,000 kilometers without major repairs. The main thing is that the owner does not interfere with them on this path through savings and inadequate operation. Now about diesel engines. The unit BMW was content with only inline 4s. 118D 2.0 liters 122 horsepower M47 22D20, 120D 2.0 liters 163 horsepower M47 22D20. Until mid-2007, there were only two diesel modifications with the M47 turbo diesel. This is an engine with a cast iron cylinder block, chain drive and common rail. In general, this is a very reliable engine, $500,000 and even $1 million if you pay a little more attention to it. One of its unpleasant features is the swirl flaps, which can come off and cause damage to the cylinders. The timing chains of this engine last more than 300,000 kilometers. The fuel system, in principle, too, its health depends on the quality of the fuel. 116D 2.0 liters 115 horsepower N47D20C, 118D 2.0 liters 143 horsepower N47D20C, 120D 2.0 liters 177 horsepower N47D20C, 123D 2.0 liters 204 horsepower N47D20D. After restyling, the BMW 1 Series switched to the new N47 turbo diesel. Its timing chain drive has moved to the flywheel. The chains have become flimsy, they can barely survive 200,000 kilometers before stretching. And yes, at the turn of 2010 they gave nightmares to fans of diesel BMWs with sudden brakes, because previously BMW engines did not allow themselves to do this. The light alloy block of the N47 engine also bursts quite easily due to overheating. This diesel engine is more forced and loaded, so you should not neglect its radiators. Its swirl flaps are less troublesome. They do not threaten to get into the cylinders. As with any turbo diesel, once every 200,000 kilometers you will have to remove the intake manifold for thorough cleaning of the layer of soot and oil. The most powerful version, 123D, is equipped with a twin-turbo version of this diesel engine. A very peppy engine that does not create any special problems. Both generations of diesel engines have expensive crankshaft damper pulleys. The original for M47, 1123-7-800-5696, will cost $700, and for N47, $11,237,823,191, $420. There are cheaper substitutes. The first generation BMW 1 Series was equipped with two 6-speed automatic transmissions, American and German. GM6L45 6-speed automatic transmission. The GM6L45 transmission was installed mainly with gasoline 4s N45 and N46, as well as with the N52 engine. ZF6 HP19 6-speed automatic transmission. More often on the unit there is an automatic ZF6 HP19. Both transmissions are good, but the GM transmission is more delicate and capricious. The German automatic lasts longer. The pressure pipe of the air conditioning system is laid along the right side member and separated from the exhaust manifold by a heat shield. The reference point is the neck of the windshield washer reservoir. It is deep under the neck that the Freon tube is laid. Dirt and moisture collect in this place, which over time leads to corrosion of the aluminum tube with the formation of holes. Typically holes through which Freon escapes form near the pressure sensor in the air conditioning system. The tube is expensive, and removing/installing it is a troublesome task. In order to avoid its corrosion, you need to regularly remove the dirt that has collected around it on the spar. By the way, diesel versions have covers in the wheel arches. 51,717,141,874, 51,717,141,873, that prevent dirt from getting on the front side members. Therefore, diesel ones do not have much dirt in these places. Original covers cost $15. They can be added to the arches of gasoline 1 cars. On many units the low washer fluid level indicator lights up and does not go out. In this case, you will have to buy and install a new level sensor. The original, 17,137,553,919, will cost $15. There are cheaper substitutes. The fan control unit is installed on the fan itself. This is a standard problem with BMW. The sealant layer at the entrance of the wires to the block is destroyed, and all the road dirt gets there. As a result, the wires soldered to the contacts come off. All this can be successfully repaired, but it is better to preventively and prophylactically solder the contacts and apply sealant instead of the old cracked one. The cooling system of gasoline engines N45, N46 and N47 has an additional pump, 64,116,928,246. It is electric, installed on the left front support glass of the body. This pump serves to increase the circulation of warm antifreeze to the stove. When this pump stops working, the performance of the stove provided the engine is well warmed up, is low. Thanks to this pump, after stopping the engine, the stove heats up for about 20 minutes. The failure of this pump is indicated by the corresponding error, O0A6D1. An electric pump can be repaired very simply. You just need to replace the brushes of its commutator. The battery in the unit is installed in the trunk. The positive wires extend to the engine compartment along the starboard side. They go out into the rear right arch. Threaded terminals are made in this transition. Aluminum wires of a hefty cross-section are connected to them in the wheel arch. Their crimp terminals, primarily the power wire terminal, simply break off. After this, the car will open, the ignition will turn on, but the starter will not come to life. All this can be repaired, just replace the crimp tip. These tips should be protected with thick lubricant. By the way, there have been unpleasant cases of car fires. Also, due to deterioration of contact, electronics may malfunction in this place, including the motor of the valvetronic mechanism may work sluggishly. From time to time, the BMW 1 Series experiences uneven wear on the rear brake pads and discs, plus brakes squeaking during and after pressing the pedal. This all indicates that the rear brake calipers are wedging and their guides are worn out. Preventative repairs, including replacing the repair kit and adding lubricant, will prevent you from encountering these problems. Rear wheel speed sensors, also known as ABS sensors, read the speed using rings placed on the axle shafts. Of course, over time these rings corrode and break down, resulting in the car periodically starting to jerk due to the traction control system being activated, and then all ABS is turned off. Original new rings in the original are sold only with axle shafts. Only one non-original manufacturer sells these rings separately, 0900764. They can replace old rusted ones, but if one of the ABS sensors dies, then it can be localized using a proprietary scanner. The front suspension of the 1 Series is borrowed from the E90 Troika. There are McPherson struts and no obvious weak points. According to BMW tradition, the lower control arm is divided into two. Each contains a silent block and a ball joint. Originally, both lower control arms cost $120, $160. There are, of course, many substitutes. The original levers easily lasted 150,000 kilometers. Front stabilizer links, $35 each, support bearings $31,306,767,451, for struts, $100 each. The rear suspension has 5 levers for each wheel. The weak point here is the floating silent blocks. They are installed at the connection of the knuckles with the lower arm, on which the springs rest. These silent blocks, $33,326,792,553, squeak loudly when worn. They are sold separately. The original ones cost $70. The remaining silent blocks are not sold separately in the original. They can be purchased with lever assemblies. Original levers cost $90–$200. Replacement parts, including silent blocks, are much cheaper. The rear shock absorbers are attached to the lower control arms via rubber pads, $33.52–$406–287. Typically, these supports serve less than shock absorbers, because road dirt destroys their dampers. Then a knock appears in this place. Original rear shock mounts cost $70. Over 7 to 10 years of operation, the rear suspension springs sag noticeably. They usually don't buy the original as a replacement, because they $33,536,767,338 will cost $330. Substitutes are 5 times cheaper. The rear gearbox usually serves well, but at high mileage it can hum due to bearing wear. To extend its service life, you should change its oil at least once every 100,000 kilometers. This is especially true for versions with 6-cylinder engines. At high mileage, the rear crosspiece of the driveshaft may also howl. In this case, it is better to take the cardan to a specialized workshop to replace the crosspiece. The body of the BMW 1 Series is fine. Rust does not bother and does not bloom even on the oldest and most worn-out specimens. On the outside, it appears only at those points and places where the sand has deeply scratched the paint layer. To reassure yourself, you should look into the wheel arches, namely in those places that are hidden from view by plastic. Also, when viewed from below, it is worthwhile to generally assess the extent of corrosion. Most likely, you won't find anything bad. It doesn't come down to rotten corrosion here. At the same time, the original paint is not reliable protection against stones flying from the road. Highway runs usually leave marks in the form of chips on the hood. The glass of the side mirrors on these cars delaminates and, so to speak, rusts. Moisture gets under the mirror surface, and indelible stains appear. Reflective elements have to be replaced with new ones. Original 51-16-7 145-267 and 51-16-7 145-268 pieces of glass will cost about $120 a piece. Of course, there are many substitutes. They are several times cheaper. Almost 100% of the problems with the 1 Series are the rear windshield wiper. Fluid enters its gearbox and is supplied to the windshield washer nozzle. Water is supplied through a shaft that drives the rear wiper. When the shaft seal wears out, water constantly seeps into the gearbox and even flows out of it under the tailgate trim. This process is aggravated by the fact that the shaft corrodes, further damaging the seal. After this, it is almost impossible to deal with water leakage into the gearbox once and for all. In general, this process develops like this. First, the wiper stops working. The owner disassembles the gearbox housing and discovers corrosion on jammed gearbox rods, teeth cut off by a worm on a plastic gear, and an electric motor flooded with water. As a rule, everything is limited only to problems with the rods in the locomotive gearbox, but corrosion can be cleaned off, and then everything can be generously protected with lubricant. But water will continue to spill through the seal. An original new rear wiper drive will cost $280. There are many substitutes that are 2 to 3 times cheaper. There are usually no problems with front windshield wipers. If they suddenly malfunction, then you need to change the control relay. 61,366,980,177. Over time, the springs in the leashes weaken, i.e. the window lifters will press against the glass weaker. A signature problem of many BMW models is the appearance of rainwater or water in the cabin after washing in the cabin. The symptom is clear: wet rugs. Water pours onto them literally from the doors due to the noise and waterproofing inside the doors peeling off. In general, it comes off as a rule, not because of age, but because it was once peeled off and poorly glued back. In addition, moisture can penetrate into the side niches of the trunk through the ventilation grills located behind the cheeks of the rear bumper. Moisture enters the interior along the perimeter of these grills. The problem is eliminated by adding sealant under the frames of these grills. Much less often, the carpet under the driver's feet gets wet due to the fact that water pours there through the technological holes in the engine shield. For example, through a burst or pop seal around the hood lock cable. By the way, the hood cable on these cars often breaks. The cable consists of 2 parts, which are connected under the hood in a plastic box. You can replace any of the torn parts separately. The BMW 1 Series was equipped with 2 different radios, depending on the configuration, business or professional. On the display of these radios, flare or burnt out pixels appear. You have to either somehow change the displays or the entire radio units. If the BMW 1 Series suddenly turns out to be de-energized, it can be revived with a strong blow to the glove compartment. At this point in the instrument panel there is a fuse box, which is connected to the positive wire with a weak push-on terminal. It is better to improve it and replace it with a tip with a screw connection so that the contact in this place does not disappear or burn.